Well, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for attending this session. I have to say something before Gabby asks a couple of questions. I actually recorded this one in one go. So I think I'm becoming more metacognitive, right? It's always fun to record the sessions, but I always have to stop and, rephrase something, go back. But this was actually the one that went right from the start. And so I guess that's evidence that I'm becoming more metacognitive, I suppose, right? Well, so I'm ready for your questions, your comments, and I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope it's useful. And, Gabby has already asked a lot of interesting questions that I would love to comment on, because I think there's a lot of confusion when we think about metacognition and the part that we play as teachers, as educators. Is it really our job to make our students more metacognitive, or does that beat the purpose? Because, becoming more metacognitive should come from their side, right? And then again, if it doesn't, so what do we do then, right? So yes, Kata, thank you very much. Thank you. So do you want to say something, Gabby, or should I just go back to the questions and try to answer them?
I don't know where to start, André. So I have quite a few questions, to be honest. And I wonder whether we should start with the question that I put in the chat box, and Kata reacted to it. And it was very, very interesting what she said. So what I said in the chat box is, okay, is it really, say, I'm an EFL teacher, so I teach English as a foreign language, right? I know very little about neuroscience and metacognition, right? So what is my role as a teacher, as an English teacher in this respect? And do I really, is it expected of me to teach metacognitive skills to adults? Like, say, yesterday I got a new group of students, adults, okay? Now I look at my students and, oh my God, I'm asking too many questions at the same time. Sorry, André.
No worries.
So, okay, one step at a time. So the first question is, do we teach learner independence, okay, to adults, okay? Because I was listening to your video, and that was the question that I posted in the chat box, and Kata reacted immediately. So, yes. Do we really teach it to adults, André? People who come to my class, and they are fully formed as learners. Why would I have to teach them how to be independent?
Excellent question. And I think that really walks hand in hand with the idea of how education has evolved, So this is something that I love to discuss as well. I go back to, ancient Greece or the Industrial Revolution, for example, or the Middle Ages, and you see how education has changed and formal schooling has changed over time. So we had physical punishment in the UK a couple of decades ago, for example, to make sure that students were complying with the demands of what we were teaching, or simply paying attention and being engaged, right? And I feel that we can teach those things. There are teachable skills when we talk about metacognition. But of course, it depends on the learner themselves, if they're willing to make the leap, let's say, and start becoming more metacognitive. There are learners who might not know how to be more independent, that they have been traumatized. I can, refer to some students, adult learners that I taught here in Brazil, who tried to learn English for a very long time. They went to many different schools. They actually bought the idea that they could learn in 12 weeks or 18 weeks, because that's what people are selling out there, like magic formulas to learn, because they have such a horrible memory of their time at school growing up, and they feel like they cannot learn the language. So maybe for that specific learner who is now a grown-up, we can tell them that the evidence suggests that they can learn very well, actually, that they have to take certain steps, and that it does depend on their commitment and their, being proactive, basically. It's not just about us. They shouldn't believe in those crazy, promises that people sell out there. So yeah, we can influence their mindsets in that regard, but we cannot always change, everyone. And we know that humans will be humans, and sometimes it's not really up to us, I guess, to do anything.
Oh, okay, I have to. Sorry, I was so tempted to interrupt you about 3 or 4 times, but I just
Please, that's okay.
okay. You said some students. Okay, you mentioned students willing to learn. So
Yeah,
you effectively what you said was not everybody can be independent as a learner. Only those who want to be independent, right?
well, yeah,
Only those who are willing. So my question is learner independence not all about motivation? Why do we talk about learner independence if it's simply just
yes,
students being motivated or not
definitely.
motivated? If you are motivated, you will engage with the
Yep,
material, you will
yep.
seek how to be independent. And then how can I, as a teacher, teach you how to be independent? I can't do it.
Excellent. Yeah,
I
that's a
can
great
only
question.
provide
Yeah,
checklists as a
yeah,
teacher for you, so you can actually self-assess against the checklist
yeah,
I produce as a teacher, because
definitely.
you are quite unlikely to produce your own checklist. So,
Yeah,
so learner independence is effectively students being motivated. That's it.
definitely. It goes back to motivation. But if you look at the research on motivation, you might come across Ryan and DC, and they talk about intrinsic but also extrinsic motivation. It might also come across Daniel Pink, who talks about what really drives us. Autonomy, mastery, competence, purpose, all of those things. And we know that there are different sources of motivation. And one of the sources of motivation is really us, teaching students how to learn better.
Yeah.
Because what might happen to a lot of students out there is that they think they have tried everything and that they can't do it. And because nobody actually showed them that there are different ways, different strategies that they can try out. And
Or
we
perhaps,
understand that,
or
yep,
perhaps they just can't do it.
sometimes we have to actually come to terms that that maybe some students are not well equipped to learn certain things. Maybe that they're learning something would require so much effort that they're not willing to make, and then it becomes
Okay.
virtually impossible, right?
Okay, André, one more question. So what is the ultimate product of my teaching, metacognitive skills? Or what is the outcome? What do I, like, okay, I try to make my students independent, right?
Yeah.
When do I feel happy with the job I've done? What is an independent learner? What should I expect from my student to be like at the end of my teaching learner independence process?
Yes,
Sorry,
I
it's
think
a
that
very
no,
convoluted
that
question.
that's great. I think it has to do with the idea of, if we go back again to education 1.0 or 2.0, that it was really about imposing things on students, and you can learn or you can't. It's really up to you. Nowadays, if you think about education 3.0 or 4.0, it's about inspiring also. And we live in an era that it's not just about teaching things and content and knowledge and skills, but also trying to engage students as much as we can. And I think that the product of my teaching is to acknowledge that we have more knowledge about how people learn nowadays because of all of the research that is available, and that we can very well learn how to use that knowledge to make sure that the students become more independent, because it might be part of our teaching process. It
But
doesn't
what
have
does
to
it
be an
mean?
entire revolution.
But what
Yeah,
does it mean to be more independent? This is my issue. And then there is a
yeah,
beautiful question from Kata. Sorry,
yeah.
Kata, you have to wait. I go first. Okay,
Yes,
so my question
wonderful.
first.
Yeah,
What does it mean to be independent?
great. I think the best definition would be it has to do with being proactive, going after the things that will help you learn more.
Good. So being
Because
motivated.
yes, it has to do with motivation as well, but also extrinsically motivated. Because when we talk about motivation, we're not really just talking about intrinsic, like I really genuinely want to do this. Extrinsic motivation is I will do this even though I don't want to, because there's something that is required of me. So it might be the ultimate motivator, extrinsic motivator, when we talk about psychology, is money, right? So you give people money and they do something, even though they don't want to, but they will do it. So sometimes I feel like that teachers don't get that it's not just about being intrinsically motivated. You as a teacher, you play a role. You can become their extrinsic motivator as well. So how do you teach them how to be more independent? Basically, you can help them set up strategies using extrinsic motivators for them to actually do the stuff that they have to do. And maybe they cannot do that alone. They cannot do that alone. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the question Kata is asking. No, I actually don't think, because that was my next question. Can a learner become independent without the teacher's guidance? Is it even possible?
Yes, I believe some people are self-taught, right? We know that. I feel maybe some people, and this has happened to all of us probably, some people feel like they should be doing something or learning something, but they have tried many times and they couldn't do it. So they will find a video tutorial on YouTube, or they will read a self-help book or a blog or something like that. And then they decide that they will start implementing different strategies, and maybe they will have a planner. They will set up micro actions every week. For example, they will have a progress check to make sure that they are sticking to the task. And then it might work for some people. They can actually do it without anyone's help, but they need to be proactive again, to go search, right? They need to find something to help them. Yeah.
So, okay, my next question, Andre. Again, going back to the new group of students I got yesterday, I look at my students. How do I know they are independent?
Yes, I think it takes time. It's not something you can assess right away, just after meeting your students. It depends on their attitudes and behaviors in the classroom, and how they engage with the materials, with the work that they have to. And if they come to you when they are in trouble, because this is a very good evidence that they want to be more independent, that they know they need help, they are not being able to do something, they will come for you.
But that is not necessarily the case, because it may be the case of someone's psychological issues. People may be shy. People may be, I don't know, afraid of failure and asking silly questions. Okay, but in particular, when people are shy, then how does metacognition help here, and how? And I think we have to go back to what Kata is saying, because we seem to be ignoring the chat. Okay, so I'm going to take a little break. Okay,
Sure.
If you just, sorry.
Yes, Kata just said something. If they have previous successful learning experience, like learning other languages, yes, that matters. And I think this is something that probably answers at least partially what Gabi was saying. There is a notion that goes actually walks hand in hand with metacognition, and it's called self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is really your ability to set goals, stick to goals, and do what's necessary to accomplish goals. And we can be talking about any goal. It could be, might as well be a learning goal, right? And one of the things that we know, one of the sources of self-efficacy by Albert Bandura, who was a very famous psychologist, is vicarious learning or vicarious experience and inactive mastery, right? So vicarious experience is looking at someone do something and being successful and realizing that if they can do it, I can also do it. So really, and as teachers, we can expose our students to those success cases, let's say, cases of success of people who have been able, who have accomplished something. We can do that. It could even be part of our linguistic goal of the class. We show a video with that person, but then we are, subconsciously working with self-efficacy as well. The other source is enactive mastery. Enactive mastery has to do with the idea of starting, taking the first step and seeing that you can do it, and then becoming more confident. Because what stops students from doing certain things normally is the fear of failure. And then if you get them to a welcoming environment and you say that, you know what, the evidence suggests that you can do it, I can help you, I'm here to support you, they feel free and more comfortable to actually do something. They realize that they can do it. Lots and lots of people, and I'm sure you've been through situations like that. You don't do stuff because you feel like you're never going to be able to do stuff, so you don't even get started. And that's the source of self-efficacy, that right there. So as a teacher trying to promote learner independence, I can help students take that first step. See, you could do it. See, come here, do this for me. Oh, take a look. What we should not do is ignore them, right? We can have a conversation with them. We can invite them to do something to make them feel more comfortable. And that will maybe serve as a source of self-efficacy and help them become more independent. Will they always be independent? Not necessarily. It might be related to their emotional state that day. So sometimes they will just go back to their baseline, But if we do that systematically over the semester, we increase their chances of becoming more successful learners, right?
Yeah. I'm still not 100% convinced in terms,
Yes.
I mean, I still feel that the concept of learner independence is rather woolly. And I feel like this is a very, very vague buzzword that hundreds of teachers kind of fell in love with. Okay, it's great to talk about learner independence. It's great to think that you know how to make your students independent. But every time I really try to think in some concrete terms about learner independence, I just can't put my finger on what it actually is, other than motivation, other than critical thinking skills. So essentially helping students make connections. But I wouldn't call it a learner independence. I would call it good teaching. So when we teach, we help students see connections. We help students build on their prior knowledge. We help students understand that spaced repetition helps. So these are all learning skills and techniques. But why do we call it? Why do we refer to it as learner independence? Because
that's
it
a good
feels
question.
like it's a totally new concept, when in fact it's not new. I mean, learner independence is part of almost, almost like if you think of elements of learner independence are in students doing homework, students asking questions, students arriving on time, students organizing their time, how to study and when to study. But this has been around for years. So why are we now talking about learning?
I think the focus is slightly different nowadays, Gabby. It's really on the fact that students will, set priorities, and this is really independent study, right? So of course we can help them become more independent in the classroom, because that's when we spend time with them, but to really make sure that they are doing the things that are necessary for them to learn. Because what is the opposite of that? I've taught many students like that over the years, the students who only believe that coming to class, listening to the teacher, doing the classwork, and that's it, that's enough for them to learn. And when a student becomes more independent, they realize that there are actions they have to take outside of the classroom time to organize themselves and study. And again, it has always been like that, if you think about it, But then social psychology and cognitive psychology have labeled this, learner independence, and even education, EFL, different areas have labeled as learner independence, because there's a body of research, a body of work that we can go to and look for the elements that we can teach our students so that they can become more independent, right? And I think really when we address the students, in the classroom, you have to be more independent. It's not just about me and you coming here and doing the classwork. I mean, I've given you all the tips and strategies that you can use, but it's really about your own time and how you organize that. Otherwise, it might not be as effective, right?
But it's always been like that. It has always been like that. The skill of taking notes, right? So the skill of questioning authority and questioning the teacher, not just accepting what the teacher says, but also questioning what people say. This is being independent, right? So, I mean, my point is, the point I'm trying to really make is that because it seems to be almost a new concept, like learner independence. There's so much out there about learner independence this, learner independence that. And then teachers just scratch their heads thinking, what is this concept? How come I can't visualize it in my classroom? How can I?
Like I said, I think the answer has to do with the spectrum that I was talking about. Because if you go back only 50 years in Brazil, and Paulo Freire is the author who wrote about that, and we had this banking education type of system top down that students, it was really all about the classroom time and not raising their voice, not asking questions. It was just be quiet and take it from the teacher. The teacher is making small deposits over a very long period of time. You have to memorize facts. And that's one end of the spectrum. It's extremely teacher-centered. The students are just props in the classroom, really. And for most part of our educational system here in Brazil, that's how we've been teaching, actually. But then the other side of the spectrum, the other end, the ideal end, is a self-taught person, a person who's completely independent, even from the teacher, because they know where to go to find the materials and the metacognitive experiences to learn by themselves, right? So why do we talk about learner independence nowadays? Because of how we have evolved in terms of access to technology and resources, for example. So there was a time, maybe 30 years ago or 40 years ago, that if you wanted to learn English, you would have to go to a school to have classes with a teacher, because that was, and even today that's true. But nowadays, with all of the resources that you have, you can actually come very closer to that end of the spectrum, that you can do almost everything by yourself by accessing the resources that are out there. But of course, this is really just an exception if you look at the universe of English language teaching. So that's why we talk about learner independence, because before you had to go to a place to get your hands, let's say, in the resources for you to learn something. Nowadays, you have those resources available many times for free, and you can do them independently. So regardless of a teacher, but still you have to be extremely metacognitive and committed to be able to do that by yourself, right?
Yes. Kata has just posted a question, and it's funny because Kata, great minds. Okay, this is exactly what I want to ask André. So we think alike. Now, so André, I mean, just listening to you, okay, the conclusion might be, what is the role of a teacher in that case? Are teachers redundant? I mean,
not at all. Not at all. Like I said, I think you're thinking in terms of dichotomy. It's a spectrum. It's never, it's never two extremes. It's a spectrum. We know that direct instruction plays a fundamental role in learning. And I feel like teachers are nowadays fearing for their jobs because, if everybody should be independent, so what am I supposed to do? You are supposed to tell them, that there are ways for them to organize themselves, to be more proactive outside of the classroom. And then when you combine those two things, you have great teaching in the classroom. You tell your students that there are strategies that they can, implement to become more independent and do more self-study. Then you have the best of both worlds. But again, it's a spectrum. We cannot think in terms of dichotomy. It's either that or that. There is a huge line. And what we want is to get closer to the independence end, right? But we're still very close to the center, that they also need us to give, for example, how do students even select what kind of syllabus or, overall curriculum they are going to study? That's overwhelming. So we have the job of a curator, moderator, teacher, instructor. We are all, doing all of those things. But
Well,
now more than ever, we can help them also do more self-study on their own also.
yeah. I mean, that was exactly what I put in the chat box. I mean,
Yeah.
an independent learner is always dependent on my guidance as a teacher. So
Right.
are students really independent in that sense? But my other question is, if you like, assuming that this is something that we should teach, okay, how to
Yeah.
be more independent, okay, assuming that this is my role as an EFL teacher, how do I teach it? Do I teach this kind of
Yeah.
alongside the subject that I teach, so English,
Yeah.
or do I have separate sessions whereby I teach students how to be more independent?
That's also a great question. I think there's a third option. You can embed that into your teaching. Like I said, you can show vicarious experience or a learner who has been successful in learning as part of your linguistic goal. Maybe you're going to use the grammar structure from the video or the vocabulary from the video. Maybe you can watch the TED Talk with your students that Carol Dweck gave a couple of years ago on growth mindset, and that can be part of your communicative goal. And then they will realize, well, that I can actually possibly change my mindset and focus more on commitment and effort rather than talent or IQ or something like that. But also, I'd say that's definitely part of our role as teachers in this world of education 4.0 or something like that. But it doesn't have to be necessarily. But then if you choose not to work with those elements in the classroom, you have to be aware that the evidence that is out there is telling you that you can, and you don't have to make, great changes in the way you teach, really. So you can either say that, well, I can help my students become more independent because this is part of their era now. They are on social media, they are on YouTube, they can find resources without my help because it's out there. It's just part of who they are. They're digital natives. Or I can simply not focus on those things because my job is to focus on teaching them linguistically, right? And then some students will not benefit from that. So I think we have the power to help more students learn more effectively if we take those things into consideration. But again, you can choose whether this is going to be part of your role or not, right? The only thing you should not do is to promise the earth that they are going to learn very, very effectively because you know everything about neuroscience and metacognition, and so that we know that doesn't work. So again, the teacher will never become redundant, really, because we need somebody to work as a co-regulator, as an extrinsic motivator, and somebody who actually understands what it is that they have to learn, to give them direct instruction, to share knowledge and content and develop skills. That's why personal trainers and coaches, for example, if you go to the gym, so by yourself, you might not work out the way you have to because you don't have that person who really knows what you should be doing next to you, telling you to do those things, right? So again, it's really about trying to get the best of both worlds and realizing that this is a spectrum, really. It's not you're either independent or you're not. There are levels of independence that can be achieved, and you can help your students become more independent. Some students don't need to be so independent. We know that different students have different brains. The brain is unique, really. Some students, they can learn quite effectively, and it has to do with their upbringing, maybe their IQ, their EQ, without really doing much outside of the classroom time. But consistently over decades, possibly centuries, many students haven't learned that way because they haven't been as independent as they could to actually do the things that they have to outside of the classroom time. And now we know that. We have that knowledge and we can help them become that, right?
I wonder if someone else, because I'm just watching the time and I still have questions, but
Yes.
Again, I feel like we are ignoring Kata.
Kata.
And I wonder if someone may perhaps want to say something as well, because maybe there is someone here with us today who feels as strongly about learner independence as I do. And
Please
as
do
you can
share.
see, I'm not quite clear on what this concept entails, let me put it like this. So as much as I love the sound of it, I'm not quite sure if this is if I fully understand the principles of it, because I feel like it's not new, it's been around, it's essentially what it is it's good teaching, okay?
Definitely.
That we now call developing learner independence. So I wonder if perhaps someone want to speak. Kata, did you want to speak? It's okay to say no.
Please, Kata, if you want to say something.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Good to have you here.
So thank you for inviting me. So I would just say that I think the best is what you just said, just add to the lessons like an ongoing training. So you can teach them coping strategies at the beginning of a course, and then tiny bits every time, maybe just note-taking, use of dictionaries, things like that. So it's ongoing, and this is something that is good and works in young learner classrooms and in adult classrooms as well, because everyone needs to move from a point to another, and they need teachers' guidance. So this was my point. Actually, it's not a question, just an opinion, or something that works in practice for me.
But Kata, but do you agree with me that this is, even what you just said, this is not, it's not something new, right? So, so are we talking about a really, really old concept?
I think it's just redressing something. So it's like an innovative approach of something, but this is what happens all the time. Actually, we can't really discover something new, but we can always reflect, revisit, and then put in a different light, and then put in our classroom. Our classrooms are changing. We move to different platforms and ways of teaching. So it will always look different, and then we can rediscover something that worked in the past. We just call differently.
But Kata,
and I think there's a concrete example. I mean, just to illustrate that point, I think it has to do with our access to things nowadays, because and again, the evolution of how, education really, happened over the years, because there was a place and time for you to get access to the things that you need, the materials for you to actually learn something. And then nowadays, as we move toward a place that we can find so many materials out there, the teacher can help us say, you know what, you have access to so many things, but what do you do? Do you access them? Do you use them? And that's on you, really. And then you can come to me and show me, the videos you watch, the podcasts you listen to, the texts that you read on the web. And that's really on you. That's your part. And then many years ago, we didn't have that. So the students were really dependent on what the teacher gave them, because that was all that existed, really, basically. And that's why nowadays we're talking about learning independence through the perspective of your access to materials to learn, really, because we have so much more access nowadays. And I think that's probably why they're using this term, because you can spend many, many hours without any teacher guidance necessarily, going through the web and finding lots of podcasts in English to practice listening, finding YouTube videos, finding articles to read and stuff like that. And it's really not something that was assigned by the teacher or was provided by the teacher. So that's why I think we are looking from the idea of access to materials and to content, really.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to again talk about my little niece. I always talk about my little niece. I just wonder if you would consider her an independent learner. She's 15. She absolutely hates her English lessons. She never learns anything at school. She cannot stand the teacher. She cannot stand the books, and she says it's all boring. Yet she is learning English. She's actually a B2 level student at the moment, and she learns from TikTok, crosswords,
Yeah.
little things that she can just put her hands on. And so, is she an independent learner?
Yeah, I'm sure she's independent. I mean, again, it's a matter of degree, right? It's not either or. It's a matter of degree. And I feel like what normally happened over the years, for many years, is that the teachers would require students to do exactly the same thing in every lesson. And that's very teacher-centered. And then there was no room for someone like your niece, for example, to actually learn through her interests, likes and dislikes, maybe. And that also has to do with learner independence, and it has to do with other words we've used for a very long time, like personalization, for example, differentiation, right? But then what she does after the class is over that relates to her interests, or something that might actually be more engaging for her, so that really directly relates to the idea of being more independent. So what happens, I think, is that some students will be more or less independent. They will go after things and materials to consume in a way so that they can practice their English. And you, as a teacher, you can be the catalyst of starting this process. You can tell them it's not just about the stuff that we do in the classroom. Nowadays, not like very unlike before, you have access to the whole world, through your computer. But what are you doing with that? Are you doing anything about that? Or are you just doing the homework I assign you? Right? So if you are doing more, then you are more independent. You understand that, oh, there's much I can do to actually become a better, more effective learner. And again, that's really up to you. I can just get it started. I can talk about it, right? I can give you the direction. I can give you guidance. But if you don't do it, then, well, it's up to you at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, with her, it's not the case of doing more. It's the case of not doing homework, but doing TikTok and some other stuff to learn English. So I'm not quite sure if this is independence, you see. But anyway.
This, again, there unfortunately, there are students who will not do the homework because they're not motivated again, right? And there should be an extrinsic motivator. It could be even punishment, like behavioristic types of motivation. But if you allow those students, and again, I'm not saying you should do that all the time, but at some point you allow them to do homework that really matters to them. That has to do with something that they like or something that they're interested in, but still dealing with the same structure, the same vocabulary. So then again, you're teaching them that you don't always have the right resources or answers for everybody to learn effectively. You assign the same homework to everyone basically, and you realize that students are different, and they have to take the initiative and realize that I have to do this. Then I can't expect my teacher to cater to everything that I like, to actually know everything that I'm interested in. So as an independent learner, I have to realize that I have to do something either way. And it could be related to what my teacher is teaching. It has to be related to what they are teaching, but it could be aligned with my interests, with the stuff that I like. And then again, you are independent enough to do that, right?
I can see Hedy is really keen to ask a question, but I can't stop asking. Hedy, go on. Okay.
My question, André, is how much independence would you allow space for if students would like to get to university, for instance, where they need to, take the exact same entrance exam?
Yes.
So if I watch this TikTok video, you watch that YouTube video. So where do these meet each other? So
yes, I think that there's a point that they shouldn't really have that much independence, because again, it's about conforming or complying, right? So that's why I've been thinking about learnification by Gert Biesta, for example. It's not all about the learner themselves, but really about education. We have to teach, and some students will be able to do that and learn. Some will not. Some will find another way because they're more independent to learn the same thing, right? Even though they're not following our proposed steps, So there, again, it's very hard to strike the balance there. So where do we draw the line? But if you think about it, when you get to university, you'll have independence to choose the topic of your dissertation based on your interests, right? And you have to do research to write about that. But there will be times that you will have a summative assessment, a test that everybody will take, and it's exactly the same. So what I'm saying here is that you have to mix those things in the learning process, right? And you have to realize that some students are not successful at the university level precisely because they were not independent enough to find other ways to accomplish the things that they had to, and they just whined and complained and maybe gave up, right? So we can teach them how to become more independent. And this teaching doesn't have to take 50% of your class time. It could be embedded into your chosen activities in terms of podcasts and videos. You know, you can actually get them to listen to a podcast on self-efficacy. You can get them to watch Carol Dweck's video on growth mindset. You know, you can get them to watch or to read Lisa Feldman Barrett's article on how we construct emotions in the brain. So there are things you can do that actually are could be part of your English teaching. You know, they are going to get language and structures from those materials, and you know, in parallel, learn about how to become more independent, right? How to have different mindsets and different attitudes toward learning.
Kata is saying she needs the list, so maybe we can put it in the forum, Hedy. So yeah, if André, if
she's joking, yeah.
I have an article coming out. It's beliefs and attitudes that influence learning. It's metacognition, self-efficacy, growth mindset, and I think there was another one, neuroplasticity. Yeah. So I can share that with you, Kata, when it's published.
Yeah, I mean, I have no more questions, André. I mean, I do have questions. I have more questions, but yes, we don't have enough time to really develop, you know, any more discussion. Sure. So yeah. I don't know if Hedy has a question or maybe someone else.
I have, for instance, when it comes to neuroplasticity, and I remember you once mentioned that it's, I don't know how beneficial it is for students to know the science behind that, what happens in their, you know, brain, yes. You know, so I don't know whether they need, because most of the time when we kind of preach, they just like, you know, they are yes, they find themselves outside playing with the fairies in the garden, you know, so it's like they don't listen. So the more we want to teach, the more they resist. So
this is a great question. When I did the first masterclass here, I talked about the engage, build, and consolidate framework that was developed at the University of Bristol. Paul Howard-Jones, who was my professor, a great reference in neuroeducation. The very first element of engage is that humans have different brains. You know, every brain is unique. And we know from research, and I can direct you to the scienceoflearning-ebc.org, and you have all the references there. We have research showing that many people believe that they have a limit. And sometimes where their limit is, where they believe it is actually influences how much they're willing to do, you know, so that they can learn. And then when you tell them that our brains are always making new connections, and that's physiological, really, you know, right now your brains are making connections, you know, this is really part of our biology. And they can always make new neural pathways that has an impact on their attitudes toward learning. So they, you know, maybe they don't know, maybe they think that they're restricted, you know. So when you teach them that their brains can always make new connections, they can actually change their mindset and realize, oh, so if I do certain things like becoming more metacognitive and asking my teacher for help and other resources, other things, I can actually learn, you know. So there is research about neuroplasticity, self-efficacy, metacognition, and mindset, growth mindset, and grit by Angela Lee Duckworth.